Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to Almost the Weekend. Today is February 23rd, 2024, and this is your Friday planning video. So today we're celebrating something that has not happened in 50 years. Yes, for the first time in 50 years, the U.S. Marines have an all-new combat vehicle. And yes, for the first time in 50 years, the National Zoo is without a panda. And for the first time in 50 years, the U.S. granted permission for a new type of nuclear reactor to be built here in the United States. Oh, and really what I was talking about is we've landed a U.S. lander on the moon for the first time in over 50 years, but that's not what today's video is really about, and not even the records set by NVIDIA, the Dow, or the S&P yesterday, and the final records for today's video. Note, NVIDIA added a record $277 billion in market cap yesterday, the largest single-day increase ever. Today's not about records or the first of whatever in 50 years. It is, of course, about planning, so let's get to that. Before I get more into it, let me go ahead and get this out of the way. Please note that I do not give personal tax or legal advice, but with your permission, I will work with your legal and tax advisors to form your team to strive to get the best from your financial plan. Now, some tales from the front lines to start. A few items today: asset location, asset allocation, and proper weights to all that you own. First, a quick note on asset location. This was another frontline tale this week when we discussed the pros and cons of the different types of accounts, really the three types. As to when you take the money out to live on, you have three possibilities. The money will either come out tax-free, and this can be done in the following ways, not just these ways, but these are a few of them. They can be in Roth IRAs or Roth 401k accounts. They can also be qualified education expenses that come from a 529 account. And finally, they can come from some special insurance products. Other asset location is that which will defer taxes until you take the money out. And this is usually the traditional 401k or traditional IRA. This money is going to grow tax deferred. And the key here is that you can control how much you withdraw at any given time, and thus controlling and adjusting your taxable income for the situation. Again, this is work we'll do with your tax advisor, but if you're going to retire in the coming years, it may be worth it to hold this money in the deferred accounts until the employment income goes away, and you can replace it with taxable income from these accounts while managing that income level for optimal tax planning. Again, this can get pretty complex, so this is why your tax advisor is so important to work with on this. Finally, taxable accounts as a location. And this is where your withdrawals will not be subject to taxation or income taxation in most cases. But if you generate capital gains in order to take that withdrawal, there will be a gain recognized and potentially taxed. But as long as it is a long-term capital gain, it will normally not be recognized as ordinary income, but instead under capital gains tax rates. So that is the idea of asset location, and it is more and more important now, more than ever, especially as that stretch IRA has been removed from the equation. You're no longer just doing this planning for you, but also for your heirs. There are a lot of options. Please, let's get the whole legal and tax team together with the investment team and develop your plan. So to be clear, let's now shift to asset allocation. And this can be defined in many ways. For purposes today, I'll use the following definition. One is allocations to stocks, bonds, and cash. The other is allocation among different types of investments. This can include insurance products. Just to be clear, this is usually one of the main focuses of your investment plan, asset allocation. Study dated back to 1986 by Brinson, Hood, and Biebauer found that 93% of differences in investment returns can be explained by asset allocation. So if you're not paying attention to this, are you paying attention to the roughly 5% attributed to stock picking or 2% linked to market timing? Most people spend most of their time on the 5% and the 2% and not enough time on the 93%. This has been followed up by a few other studies by the same team, and they bring in the simple stocks, bonds, and cash allocation, but they also bring in some of the subcategories, such as domestic and international, small, medium, and large companies. Finally, newer research on this brings in alternative asset classes as well. This is all the asset allocation that should be a part of your conversation when we build and evaluate your plan. Finally, today, let's talk about something that's being discussed a lot these days. But when I talk about weight, I'm not discussing the latest weight loss drugs and the companies that will benefit from the estimated $77 billion market for that class, estimated by asset management company Van Eck. I'm talking about the weightings in your portfolio, especially if you're using individual stocks or sector-specific funds. As I've been discussing a lot in the Monday market updates, the stocks in this market are not moving in lockstep. They are the haves and the have-nots. as is mostly the case, the issue that comes up is that over time, this requires rebalancing, or else the best performers in your portfolio become a larger and larger part of your assets. While this may seem logical and a best practice, I submit to you that it changes your risk profile of your investments, and this is very important. It is well known, documented, and even discussed that even the best companies, sectors, and even markets can have a bad month, year, or even more. It's important that your plan accounts for the risk you're taking in your weightings of your holdings. To stay broad here, let's just take a real example to prove this point. It is cherry-picked, no question, but it is going to prove the point, and it is real. In 1999, the S&P 500 was up over 19.5%, and the NASDAQ was up over 85% that same year. Before you stand up to make your point for being overweight tech stocks, note that in 2001, the NASDAQ peaked on March 10th and proceeded to fall almost 77% by October of 2002. There is no question that we've seen some pretty amazing peaks and valleys, and if you went to sleep in 2001 before the NASDAQ started to fall and woke up in 2008, right before the financial crisis, you would have thought nothing happened. Again, not that it took from October 2002 to 2008 for the NASDAQ to recover. Note that it took from October 2002 until 2008 for the NASDAQ to recover and set a new high. Now, we did just see a much longer recovery. That is over 40 years that it took for the Japanese stock market to recover from the fall in the late 1980s, but that's an outlier even for my point. The point is, if you started with an allocation to the NASDAQ, for example, in 1999, and watched your investments go up by 85%, there's a good argument that can be made, and hard to refute by normal standards, that your risk profile of your investments had changed. If you did not adjust, if you did not adjust when the NASDAQ made its 2001-2002 move, you had a large percentage of your portfolio go down by over 76%. This is fine if you can roll over and go back to sleep in 2008 or beyond, but instead think of your goals. Think that things that came up during that time: education expenses, retirement income needs, new house needs. You get the picture. If you did not need access to those funds and you just waited, you recovered, as the NASDAQ is now over 3 times higher than it was at its high in 2001. But we also know it is easy to say as we discuss it, but it's hard to hold your positions when you see them down 85%. I was in that market with some of you even, and one of the hardest conversations I had, and have had again and again in the past 30 years, is the idea of paring back when things look good or holding on when things look bad. Emotions are a difficult thing. That is why I'm bringing this up now. We are at or near market highs. Many of you have oversized tech positions that have done very well for you, and thus you hesitate to diversify or even take some profits. Each situation is specific, but taxes, time horizon, and even just plain belief all come into play. I bring this up today to focus you on what your situation is, like it or not, identify it or not, call it what you will. Your risk levels are changing, and if they go up when you should be taking less risk, this is a potential for a double hit. So that is what I have for you today. That's a lot: asset location, asset allocation, and position weighting. All of this is important for us to discuss, so please be in touch. Let's talk about it. Until then, have a great weekend.